The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the waves as Jack leaned back against his weathered fishing boat. His island life wasn't glamorous, but it had its perks: peace, coconuts, and no one around to remind him how awkward he could be. He adjusted his straw hat and squinted at the water. "All right, Lady Wiggles," he muttered to his boat, patting its side. "Let's catch something other than disappointment today." Just as he was preparing to cast his net, a flash of blue light illuminated the lagoon. Jack froze. What in the salty hell was that? His eyes darted toward the source, a glowing figure wading knee-deep in the water. Is this it? Did I finally lose it? He grabbed his binoculars, focusing on what appeared to be a woman, glowing. A ghost? A mermaid? A radioactive tourist? The figure turned, and Jack's jaw dropped. Her silver skin shimmered under the moonlight, and her eyes glowed an unearthly green. She was fiddling with a strange, cylindrical device that buzzed faintly in her hands. Jack did what any self-respecting man would do: he yelped and ducked behind a rock. The woman turned sharply at the sound. "Who's there?" Her voice was melodic but oddly mechanical. Jack peeked out, heart racing. Just a humble fisherman. Definitely not a threat. "Please don't vaporize me." She tilted her head, studying him. "Vaporize? Primitive weaponry here lacks that capability." "What are you?" "What am I?" Jack repeated, standing hesitantly. "I'm a human. You know, earthling. Meatbag with hopes and dreams." Her expression didn't change. Terrestrial mammal. Bipedal. Rudimentary intellect. Noted. Rudimentary. Hey. Jack stepped closer, curiosity outweighing fear. "And what are you? Besides really bad at introductions." She hesitated, then straightened. "I am Tylara, commander of the 5th Expanse Fleet. My vessel is..." She glanced at the smoking wreckage behind her. "Compromised. Retrieval is required." Jack's gaze shifted to the strange object she was holding. "And that's..." "A diagnostic tool for my beacon system." "Aha." Jack scratched his head. "Looks like you're poking a high-tech glow stick." She frowned. "Glow stick? Explain." "It's a cheap party thing. Fun, but useless." Tylara bristled. "This device is neither fun nor useless. Its functions are integral to my survival." Jack smirked. "Well, you sure know how to make a guy feel dumb." "Okay, Commander Glowstick, what's the plan? Because this island's not exactly stocked with alien repair kits." Tylara studied him, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Your assistance may be required. Terrestrial resources must suffice." Jack blinked. "You're asking me for help?" "Lady, I once duct-taped a coconut to a lawnmower to scare off seagulls. I'm not exactly NASA material." Tylara ignored his protest, walking toward him with her device. "You will assist. Your resourcefulness may compensate for your lack of sophistication." "Well, aren't you a ray of sunshine?" Jack folded his arms but followed her, curiosity overriding his pride. She crouched near her ship, motioning for Jack to examine it. The vessel was sleek but badly damaged, with scorch marks and missing panels. "Looks like it got in a fight with a toaster and lost," Jack muttered. Tylara turned sharply. "Your humor is inefficient." "Welcome to Earth," Jack shot back. "We cope with sarcasm. Now, what exactly do you need from me?" "Energy," she said simply. "This system requires power to initiate repairs." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Energy? Like batteries?" "Batteries?" She tilted her head, her translator garbling the word into something unrecognizable. "Yeah, little juice boxes for tech." "You don't have those." Tylara sighed, her patience visibly thinning. "Your primitive terminology is irritating. Do you possess any functional power sources?" Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "Not unless you count a solar lantern and a car battery that might explode if you sneeze on it." "Retrieve them," Tylara commanded. "Oh, sure," Jack grumbled, turning to leave. "Just let me know if you need anything else, like a warp drive or the meaning of life." As he walked away, he couldn't help but glance back. She was kneeling by her ship, her glowing form oddly beautiful against the dark water. Jack shook his head. Great. First sign of intelligent life, and she thinks I'm an idiot. Figures. When he returned with the lantern and battery, Tylara inspected them with a mix of fascination and disdain. These artifacts are rudimentary, but they may suffice. Artifacts? Jack scoffed. Lady, that's a $5 light from a tourist shop. Don't make it sound ancient. Tylara ignored him, connecting the battery to her device. Sparks flew, and she frowned. This energy output is erratic. Is this normal? For my stuff? Yeah. If it doesn't explode, it's working. Tylara sighed, muttering something in her language that Jack's translator picked up as, humans are an exhausting species. Jack grinned. You're not wrong. As the device began to hum, Tylara's expression softened. It functions. Adequate assistance, terrestrial. Jack smirked. You're welcome, glowstick. She glanced at him, her lips curving ever so slightly. Glowstick. An intriguing designation. It's a compliment, Jack lied, trying to hide his grin. Unlikely, Tylara replied, turning her attention back to the device. Jack watched her work, the surrealness of the situation finally sinking in. An alien. On his island. Asking him for help. If nothing else, he thought, it sure beat talking to coconuts. The next morning, Jack woke up to the sound of metallic clanking outside his shack. Still half asleep, he stumbled out the door to find Tylara dismantling an old bicycle he'd salvaged years ago. Her glowing eyes were focused as she examined the chain, muttering calculations in her native tongue. Morning to you too, Jack said, rubbing his face. That's my bike, you know. This contraption, she said, not looking up, utilizes rotational mechanics. Crude, but functional. Yeah, it's called pedaling. Humans have been doing it for a while. I require components, she said flatly, yanking the chain free with surprising strength. Sure, just take it, Jack muttered, watching her tear apart the bike with clinical precision. Not like I was going to use it to cruise the beach or anything. Tylara ignored him, holding up the chain. This material is pliable yet durable. Acceptable for modifications. Jack folded his arms. And by modifications, you mean ruining my stuff? She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. If it alleviates your species' natural inefficiency, I am performing a service. Wow, Jack said, shaking his head. You've got a real knack for making someone feel appreciated. She stood, holding the chain and a bundle of salvaged wires. Accompany me to the wreckage. Additional labor is required. Oh, I'm labor now, huh? Jack muttered as he followed her. When they reached the wrecked ship, Tylara gestured for him to climb inside. The interior was surprisingly intact, though the alien tech looked like something out of a fever dream. Glowing panels hummed softly, and a faint lavender mist drifted along the floor. Okay, what do I do? Jack asked, eyeing the alien controls nervously. Hold this, she said, shoving a metallic sphere into his hands. It pulsed faintly, and Jack immediately regretted asking. What is this thing? A stabilizer core, Tylara replied, not looking at him. Jack held it at arm's length. And it won't, explode or anything, right? Unlikely, she said, still focused on the ship's controls. Unlikely isn't exactly comforting. Your comfort is irrelevant. Remain still. Jack muttered under his breath but obeyed, holding the core while Tylara worked. Her hands moved with practiced precision, connecting wires and adjusting dials. You really know your way around this thing, Jack said after a moment. It is my vessel, she replied. Mastery is essential. Well, it's impressive. I mean, I couldn't fix a blender without duct tape. She glanced at him briefly, her expression softening just a fraction. Your ingenuity, while primitive, is adaptable. Was that a compliment? Jack asked, raising an eyebrow. An observation, she said, turning back to her work. Jack chuckled. I'll take it. As she continued to work, the ship's interior began to hum with renewed energy. Lights flickered to life, and a faint vibration ran through the floor. Progress, Tylara said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Great, Jack said. So, Does this mean you'll be out of my hair soon? She hesitated, her hands pausing mid-motion. Not yet. The beacon remains non-operational. Further repairs are necessary. Jack sighed. Figures. Guess I'm stuck with you a little longer. Tylara didn't respond, but her silence felt heavier than usual. Jack frowned, studying her for a moment. Hey, he said, his tone softer. You okay? I am functional, she said quickly, avoiding his gaze. Yeah, but you're also stranded on a weird little island with a guy who talks to coconuts. That's gotta suck. She glanced at him, her glowing eyes unreadable. Your idioms remain perplexing. Jack chuckled. Fair enough. But seriously, if there's anything I can do to help, besides holding weird alien orbs, just let me know. Tylara hesitated again, then nodded. Acknowledged. For a moment, the air between them felt lighter. Jack set the stabilizer core down carefully, brushing his hands on his pants. So, he said, breaking the silence. What's next, Commander? She straightened, her professional demeanor returning. We require additional resources. Your island must have reserves of conductive metals or power sources. Jack scratched his head. Well, there's an old generator in the shed, but it hasn't worked in years. Show me, she said, already heading for the exit. Jack sighed, following her. You know, a please wouldn't kill you. It is irrelevant, she replied over her shoulder. Jack shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. Despite her sharp edges, there was something oddly endearing about her bluntness. When they reached the shed, Jack pried open the door to reveal a rusted generator covered in cobwebs. Here it is, he said, gesturing dramatically. Behold, the pinnacle of human engineering. Tylara inspected the generator with a critical eye. Primitive but potentially functional. Assistance will be required. Jack groaned. Why do I feel like I just signed up for an alien DIY project? You did, Tylara said simply, handing him a wrench. Jack took it with a resigned sigh. Great. Let's get to work. Jack wiped sweat from his brow as he leaned over the old generator, its rusted bolts refusing to budge. Tylara stood nearby, her gaze sharp as she analyzed the machine's components. You know, Jack said, straining against the wrench, if you've got any alien superstrength, now would be a great time to show it off. She stepped forward, her expression neutral. Human tools are inefficient. Permit me. Without waiting for an answer, she gripped the bolt Jack had been struggling with and twisted it effortlessly. The metal groaned before giving way, and Jack stared at her in disbelief. Yeah, sure, he muttered, tossing the wrench aside. Make me feel completely useless. Tylara tilted her head. Your contributions are noted. Minimal, but noted. Jack smirked. I'm starting to think sarcasm is universal. Ignoring him, Tylara crouched beside the generator, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she began dismantling its outer casing. Jack watched in silence for a moment, his curiosity getting the better of him. So, what's the deal with your people, anyway? He asked. You're obviously way ahead of us in tech, but you got stranded here. How does that happen? She paused briefly, her expression unreadable. Circumstances beyond my control. My vessel encountered an unanticipated anomaly during atmospheric descent. Translation, you crashed. Tylara's lips pressed into a thin line. A crude oversimplification, but accurate. Jack leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. You don't like talking about it, huh? It is irrelevant to our current objective. Right. Of course, Jack said, sensing the topic was off limits. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you landed here instead of, I don't know, New York or something. They'd probably put you in a lab. Tylara glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. Your species' tendency to react with hostility toward the unknown is predictable. Jack chuckled. Yeah, we're not great with first impressions. But you've got me, so that's something, right? Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before she returned to her work. Your resourcefulness is unexpected. Wow, don't get too sentimental on me, Jack said with a grin. As they worked on the generator, Jack couldn't help but notice how Tylara's demeanor seemed to shift. She was still sharp and direct, but there was a hint of something softer beneath the surface. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination or if she was starting to let her guard down. After what felt like hours, the generator sputtered to life, its once rusted parts gleaming with makeshift repairs. Tylara stepped back, her expression neutral as the machine hummed softly. "Operational," she said simply. Jack whooped, throwing his hands in the air. "Hell yeah. Look at us, fixing stuff like a couple of pros." "You performed adequately," Tylara said, though there was a faint glimmer of amusement in her tone. "I'll take that as a compliment," Jack replied. Tylara turned her attention back to the generator, connecting a series of wires that led to a small, handheld device. Jack watched as the device lit up, its display glowing with alien symbols. "Okay," he said, stepping closer. "What's that thing do?" "It will amplify the beacon's signal range," Tylara explained. "With sufficient power, it may reach my people." Jack hesitated. "And what happens when they get the signal?" "They just swoop in and pick you up." "Correct. And that's good, right? No chance they'd show up and decide to, I don't know, vaporize the island or something?" Tylara raised an eyebrow. "Your imagination is excessive. My people are not hostile." "Good to know," Jack said, though he couldn't shake a lingering unease. Tylara activated the device, and the generator's hum grew louder as a beam of light shot into the sky. It was faint at first, barely visible against the midday sun, but it grew steadily brighter, pulsing rhythmically. "There," Tylara said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. Jack shielded his eyes as he stared at the beam. "Well, that's definitely going to attract attention." "Precisely the objective," Tylara replied. "Yeah, but maybe not the kind you want," Jack muttered. As if on cue, the sound of an approaching boat reached their ears. Jack's stomach sank as he turned toward the shoreline, spotting a sleek vessel cutting through the water. "Ah, we've got company," he said. Tylara frowned. Unanticipated variables complicate the operation. "Yeah, that's one way to put it," Jack said, already moving to grab a torp to cover the generator. The boat pulled up to the shore, and Jack recognized the two figures on board, a pair of local fishermen he occasionally traded with. They stepped onto the sand, their eyes immediately drawn to the pulsing beam of light. "What the hell's going on here, Jack?" one of them asked, his tone suspicious. Jack forced a smile, stepping in front of the generator. "Oh, just a little DIY project. Nothing to worry about." The other fisherman squinted at Tylara, his brow furrowing. "Who's she?" "She's, a friend. From out of town," Jack said quickly. The first fisherman crossed his arms. "Out of town, huh? And what's with that light show?" "Just testing some new tech," Jack said, trying to sound casual. "It's a work in progress." The fisherman didn't look convinced, but before they could press further, Tylara stepped forward. "The matter is classified," she said, her tone firm. The fisherman exchanged a glance, clearly unsettled by her presence. "Classified, huh?" the first one said. "You better not be bringing trouble here, Jack." "Trouble? Me? Never," Jack said, raising his hands. "We're just keeping busy, that's all." The fishermen grumbled but eventually returned to their boat, casting wary glances over their shoulders as they departed. "That was close," Jack muttered, exhaling sharply. Tylara frowned. "Your associates are easily deterred." "Yeah, well, let's hope it stays that way," Jack said. Tylara turned back to the beacon, her focus unwavering. "The signal must be maintained. Additional disruptions are unacceptable." Jack nodded, his unease growing as he realized just how high the stakes had become. Jack paced back and forth near the beam of light, his nerves on edge as the signal pulsed steadily into the sky. Tylara remained calm, her focus entirely on monitoring the device. The contrast between their demeanors couldn't have been starker. "So, how long until your people show up?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Uncertain," Tylara replied without looking up. "Signal reception depends on their proximity and the conditions of subspace interference." Jack stopped pacing and stared at her. "That's a fancy way of saying you have no idea, isn't it?" "Correct." He groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Great. So, we're just sitting ducks, waiting for who knows what to come knocking. Fantastic plan. Tylara glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Patience is a virtue, is it not? Not one of my strongest, Jack admitted. Especially not when there's a giant, glowing bullseye over my island. Before Tylara could respond, a faint hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Jack froze, his eyes scanning the sky. Please tell me that's your ride, he said. Tylara's gaze snapped upward, her brow furrowing. Unlikely. The sound pattern does not match my species' propulsion systems. Of course it doesn't, Jack muttered. Because why would anything go smoothly? The source of the noise soon became apparent as a helicopter emerged from the horizon, its blades slicing through the air. Jack's heart sank as he recognized the logo emblazoned on its side, a government agency notorious for investigating unexplained phenomena. Yeah, we're in trouble, he said, already moving to hide the generator. Tylara stepped in front of the device, her posture rigid. Your authorities must not interfere. The consequences could be catastrophic. Tell them that. Jack shot back, grabbing a top and draping it over the machine. The helicopter hovered briefly before descending onto the beach, kicking up a whirlwind of sand. Jack shielded his face as the doors opened and a group of uniformed agents stepped out, their expressions grim. The lead agent, a stern-looking woman with sharp features, approached Jack. We received reports of unusual activity on this island. Care to explain? Jack forced a smile, his mind racing. Unusual? Nah, just your average island shenanigans. You know, fishing, fixing stuff, the usual. The agent's eyes narrowed. And that beam of light? Oh, that. Just a science experiment, Jack said, trying to sound nonchalant. Nothing to worry about. Her gaze shifted to Tylara, who stood silently, her presence impossible to ignore. And who's this? She's, my assistant, Jack said quickly. She's helping with the experiment. The agent didn't look convinced. Your assistant doesn't seem local. Mind if we ask her a few questions? Jack's stomach churned as he glanced at Tylara. She met his gaze briefly before stepping forward, her expression cold and calculating. I am conducting research, she said, her tone clipped. Your inquiries are unnecessary. The agent's eyebrows rose. Research? On what? Tylara hesitated, clearly calculating her response. Terrestrial energy systems. Jack winced internally. That wasn't going to hold up under scrutiny. Terrestrial energy systems, the agent repeated, her skepticism evident. That's a broad topic. Care to elaborate? Jack stepped in, desperate to divert attention. It's a niche thing. You wouldn't believe how much you can learn from old generators, Anne. Enough, the agent interrupted, her patience clearly wearing thin. We'll need to inspect your equipment. Ah, that's classified, Jack blurted out, instantly regretting it. Classified, the agent said, folding her arms. By whose authority? Before Jack could dig himself any deeper, Tylara's wrist device emitted a soft beep. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. My people have received the signal, she said quietly, her words meant for Jack but audible to the agents. The lead agent's eyes narrowed. What signal? Jack forced a laugh. She's just messing with you. Inside joke, you know? The agent wasn't buying it. She signaled to her team, and two of them moved toward the top-covered generator. Wait, Jack said, stepping in their path. You can't. The sudden roar of an engine cut him off. Jack turned to see a massive, sleek spacecraft descending from the sky, its surface gleaming like polished obsidian. The agents froze, their eyes wide with shock. Tylara stepped forward, her posture regal as the ship landed with a hiss of steam. The hatch opened, revealing a group of tall, imposing figures clad in silvery armor. About time, Jack muttered, though his relief was short-lived as the lead agent drew her weapon. Stand down, she barked, aiming at the approaching aliens. Tylara moved with lightning speed, disarming the agent with a single, fluid motion. The other agents raised their weapons, but the aliens acted faster, projecting a shimmering barrier that surrounded the group. This conflict is unnecessary, Tylara said, her voice commanding. We are leaving. Jack watched in awe as the aliens began dismantling the generator with practiced efficiency, their movements swift and precise. One of them turned to Tylara, speaking in a melodic language Jack couldn't understand. She responded in kind before turning back to him. My people have ensured your technology will not fall into the wrong hands, she said. Your safety is no longer compromised. Jack blinked, his mind struggling to process the sudden turn of events. So, that's it. You're just going to leave? Tylara's expression softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability breaking through her stoic exterior. Your assistance has been invaluable. You have my gratitude. Before Jack could respond, she stepped onto the ship's ramp, pausing briefly to look back at him. Farewell, Jack, she said. May your resilience continue to define your species. And with that, she disappeared into the ship, which lifted off with a deafening roar. As the spacecraft vanished into the sky, Jack stood alone on the beach, the agent still stunned into silence around him. Well, he said finally, brushing sand off his hands. Guess I'll need a new generator.